Hi guys, I'm Maylin Dovan, certified athletic therapist and founder of Rehab-U Movement and Performance Therapy.
I'm Mark Berube, a former professional baseball player in the Oakland A's organization and pitching coach at the Academy of Baseball Canada.
Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about rotator cuff rehab, but specifically for the throwing shoulder. So we see rotator cuff rehab protocols all the time, and let's face it, the focus of a lot of protocols is on concentric contractions. The focus on a lot of protocols is on isolating the rotator cuff using external rotation exercises. You've heard me talk about that in previous capsules. There's a need for that in reactivating the cuff, but there's always a gap to making things a bit more specific. Specifically, Mark, you're going to tell us a little bit about, for throwers, why just working on the concentric aspect is simply not enough. Hey guys, thanks for watching our videos, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. So the concentric aspect, I mean, it's important, all right? We need some hypertrophy in the cuff to, especially like what I'm going to talk about is the fact that the work of the cuff is very much eccentrically related, right? So we need hypertrophy of the cuff to absorb the force, but at some point you're going to have to work on the eccentric part and the isometric part, probably eventually of those muscles. The thing is, when we see with, especially in baseball, I always think in baseball terms usually, but there's a lot of distraction forces happening, and usually it's over 1,000 newtons force that you got to absorb. We talk about the cuff, right? We're gonna have to work on it, but the cuff is really made of small muscles. So those small muscles are gonna have to absorb a gigantic amount of force. They can't do the work alone, so we're gonna have to work on involving the big muscles like the lats and the teres major. And we see, like in studies, baseball players are using their lats about twice as much as amateur players, and there's a reason for that. You gotta absorb force, and we're gonna have to look at a couple of exercises that are gonna work these muscles in the eccentric part.
Yeah, let's check it out. Let's see how we can get on to those muscles in a deceleration capacity.
So as we said, most of the work from the cuff is going to be eccentric, right? So we're going to have to handle a lot of distraction forces when he's going to throw. So if Carl is getting set up to throw, when he's getting to that release point, when he lets go of the ball, that's when those distraction forces happen. And if we don't stop the forces, I mean, the arm would just keep going in circles. So we're going to have to keep the joint centered. And if we only let the cuff do the work, that's way too much work. We got to get those big guys in, right? So that's what's going to keep us healthy.
So an important element in rehabbing the cuff, whether you're talking about throwing or striking or lifting, there's going to be a timing issue as well. We need the rotator cuff. We need that synchronous muscle activation pattern. And we can start to replicate that specifically for throwing. For example, for Carl, using med ball throws where the acceleration is going to be different. The position is going to be different, but the demand is going to be the same for the cuff. I'm accelerating an object and I need the cuff to decelerate, and I need those other muscles to also work together with the cuff to decelerate. So for example, just a med ball toss or throw, and he's just pushing the ball when he releases. So it's not like a throw, like a pitch, but really he's accelerating that ball as quickly as possible and then needing to decelerate at the end when the ball releases. So similar demand on those firing patterns.
So in this exercise, we're going to see Carl doing a self-deceleration catch. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the demand of the cuff and also, as we said before, of the big guys in the deceleration aspect. So baseball is 5 ounces, and we see here this little ball is 2 pounds. So obviously the weight is heavier, but the velocity of the object is much lower. So we're progressing to throwing. He still has to decelerate the arm. He's going to have to absorb the force. His cuff is working on timing to keep the humeral head centered within the socket. And all those big guys, the lats, teres majors, are working hard to accept this amount of force. So in this exercise, Carl is going to do a reverse throw where we're going to increase the demand on the cuff and those big guys that we keep saying we got to work on. So the velocity of the object is going to be higher, so that's going to increase the demand on his rotator cuff and the big guy. So I'm just setting myself up a little further, and I'm throwing the ball right about to his release point. So he's going to have to accept all that force, and then he's going to concentrically work on his cuff after. So I keep challenging him, and right now I'm just throwing it pretty slow, but the more I throw it fast, the more he's going to have to absorb it, and the more I ask him to go further, to decelerate, the harder it gets, right? So that's what it gets pretty hard.
All right, guys, so that said, there's a lot more to rehabbing the rotator cuff than the concentric. And then specifically with what you're trying to do, depending on the sport that you're working on, there's always going to be some timing aspects. Specifically in baseball, there's a lot of deceleration aspects, and you just manipulate your exercises to meet those needs, right? So deceleration, timing, those are all kind of things that we need to work on.
Yeah.
And
we see this in every sport pretty much, right? The good players are using their big muscles a lot more, and we're not saying the cuff is not important. I mean, it has to be there, it has to keep the humeral health centered. I mean, that's always going to be his job, but if we just let the small muscles do big jobs, that's not going to work. So we got to see this as a well-rounded rehab and not just stop at one place.
all right, guys, so hopefully that gives you a better understanding of what we're trying to do when we rehab the rotator cuff, and you can fill that gap a little bit better. And we'll see you next week.